When we as women step up to roles of leadership, the issues that we are most concerned about become our priorities. And here's my story. The issues that I was concerned about as a deputy county attorney, and then when I got elected to be county attorney, was making a difference in the lives of young people and helping them through the justice system, either as defendants in juvenile court or as victims of crimes that were perpetrated upon them. I also wanted to prevent those kids in juvenile court from becoming that next generation of criminals that I would be prosecuting as adults. These issues became my personal priorities. When I was first elected, my office was really, really good at holding criminals accountable for their criminal conduct, and we were very tough on prosecution issues, and I'm proud to say we still are. In 1996, I ran for county attorney because I had a passion for the job of prosecutor. I'd been in the office for 20 years. I'd served as the deputy county attorney, as the chief criminal deputy, as the chief deputy. My boss retired, and I decided I wanted to be the county attorney. I had a vision for how our office could work with law enforcement, with schools, neighborhoods, communities, to make this a better place to live and work and raise our children. And I wanted to put some very specific strategies in place that would prevent our kids from getting caught up in the criminal justice system. Those were my issues, and I was concerned about them, and when I got elected, they became my priorities. I wanted to do whatever I could to make a difference. So I put together a very large group of people in a wide variety of social services and law enforcement, probation, my office, etc. We came together, we put aside all our differences, and we created, under my leadership, the Southern Arizona Children's Advocacy Center, which is, thank you. It is a one-stop place where we take children who've been sexually and physically abused and help these child victims undergo the investigation and begin to heal. Approximately 1,000 children from throughout southern Arizona come to the center every year, and these children who have really suffered at the hands of either sexual or physical abuse and extreme neglect. They tell their story of abuse to a trained forensic interviewer in a comfortable, childlike setting, and they receive medical attention from a sexual assault nurse examiner. The police are there, CPS is there, my prosecutors are there. We are all behind a glass mirror, like kind you see on TV and the Law and Order shows. And what we can do is we can communicate with the interviewer to make sure they ask certain questions so that particular evidence is always gathered. Community justice boards are comprised of trained volunteers. These are people that we train from communities throughout Pima County. I have 20 community justice boards, and these volunteers hold family conferences, and they hold juveniles who've been arrested for the first or second time on nonviolent offenses. They hold them accountable for their offense. They assign age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate consequences designed not only to hold the kids accountable for their actions and their bad decision-making, but to also give them the kinds of consequences that assist them in problem-solving, decision-making, life skills, and help motivate the kids. They have follow-up conferences and do very close watch with these children. We have an extraordinary non-recidivism rate that is, and I forgot to write down what it is, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's about 10 times higher than what it is if kids go through the court system. Very few. Thank you. I'm going to give you a quick little story, to give you an idea of the kinds of consequences that the boards do. They meet with the kids. They have to come with their families. One young man who was arrested for shoplifting and had some small amount of marijuana on him when he was arrested, was not doing well in school, was skipping school, he had bad grades. The board met with him and his family on a regular basis and found out that what this kid really was interested in was food and cooking. And so what they assigned him as a consequence was that he had to do some research and find out what it would take to hold a dinner party. Then he had to go to the grocery store and he had to make up his list of what everything would cost and how many people he'd invite, and he had to design the invitations. He had to do the whole thing. And then he came back in and he gave a presentation to the board. It was an awesome presentation because this kid found he got to talk about what his passion was. Just awesome. As a result of that, one of the men that was sitting on my board had a friend who owned a restaurant, and he got this kid a job as a busboy in the restaurant for the summertime. The kid did so well in the restaurant that he was given some promotions, given additional duties and responsibilities. To make a long story short, he began to take interest in school. He graduated. He went to Pima College, enrolled in their culinary program, and is working today as a sous chef for one of our restaurants. These are wonderful stories. These are the kinds of stories that are replicated. By the way, we have materials up here about all of these different kinds of things. Pick them up afterwards. You too can become a volunteer on one of our boards. I was coming home from Phoenix one day when I heard on the radio that I was listening to that a young man had been stabbed in the bathroom at a Marana high school. And it was, the way they were reporting it, it was just sort of out of the blue, a stabbing. And I went, my prosecutor said, some innocent kid doesn't just get stabbed, something's going on. So I pulled off, I went to the school, I introduced myself to the principal. I said, what's the story behind this? And he told me a story about how this kid, it was the Hatfields and the McCoys. This kid's family and the other family were in a feud. The cops had been called over the weekend. There were threats made. Needless to say, the stabbing was a result of the retaliation that was occurring over the calling of the cops, etc. And the principal had no idea that any of this was going on. He had no idea that the kid who was stabbed was being prosecuted by my office for a crime that he committed on another family member of that family. So I said, hey, let's fix that because this is a priority for me. So what we did is I created the school multi-agency response teams. We are in every school district with very few exceptions. And I have juvenile prosecutors that go on a regular basis, twice a month, to the schools. They meet with the administrators, teachers, the school counselors, and guess what we do? We share information. Imagine that. We bring our lists of all the kids at that school that are being prosecuted, that are victims on cases, whether they're cases at juvenile or adult court, who are on probation. They did not ever know who was on probation or who was court-ordered into their school. The kids who are on parole from Juvenile Department of Corrections, they did not know that. And so we share all of this information. They share with us who's at risk, we share whose parents are in prison, because that puts kids severely at risk. We share all kinds of information, and I'm just pleased to say that this has been an incredible collaboration. I have a truancy enforcement program which works to keep kids in school. We work with the schools, and if you were watching the news a couple weeks ago, we did a truancy sweep, and we arrested a bunch of kids that weren't in school and their parents, and we prosecute the parents, but what the parents get to do in lieu of going to court is going through diversion and going into the community justice boards with their kids as their diversion program. Because my aim is not to make criminals out of anybody, it's to get these kids back in school where they belong, to find out what's going on under the surface and to get them in school. More than 7,000 kids are injured or die every year in unintentional gun accidents. These are kids that pick up guns, find guns, and accidentally, unintentionally, shoot themselves, shoot a sibling, shoot a friend. So I created 2 programs to deal with this because I was prosecuting kids who were shooting each other, and I was absolutely upset about it. So the 2 programs are the Communities Addressing Responsible Gun Ownership and the Lock Up Your Gun campaign. Cargo, the communities program, is a collaboration between my office, law enforcement, and trauma surgeons and physical therapists. And we do presentations around the community talking to people about gun safety. We distribute free gun locks, and we provide education about firearm safety to families, businesses, church groups, educators. If you want a presentation, let us know. The Lock Up Your Gun campaign. We are in partnership with 150 pediatricians' offices throughout southern Arizona, with health clinics, and with major agencies such as the foster care agency. And what we do in the Lock Up Your Gun campaign is we give out posters. You want to hold this up? We give out posters that say you lock up everything. Your bicycles, your computers have passwords, your house, everything, but why don't you lock up your gun? And then we give out, this is Vanna over here. We give out free gun locks. Those gun locks are bought and paid for. Those are bought and paid for by funds seized from criminals, the anti-racketeering funds. Isn't it a delicious irony that they pay for that? We have to date, this program started in 2000, and we have given out over 61,000 gun locks. Wow. If you have firearms and you have any children who come to your home, be they grandchildren or nieces, nephews, etc., lock up your guns. If you need gun locks, we'll give you as many as you need. I have discovered that most people who have guns have more than one, and you're entitled to more than one gun lock. The Safe Baby program, I was disturbed over the number of mothers that I prosecuted who were killing their babies. These were all young women who were delivering unwanted babies. They hadn't told anyone about their pregnancy. And I think there were 3 or 4 that we ended up having to prosecute in a row. I put all the right people together, and we started the Safe Baby program. And what I did, and this is the thing I feel best about, is I am a risk taker. I'm willing to step out and take a risk that other people go, oh, you can't do that. And I say, well, why not? Just because it hasn't been done. So what I did is there's a law that says that if you abandon your unborn newborn, that you will be prosecuted for abandonment. So I stepped out into the public and said, we have a Safe Baby program. I just created it with, fire departments, hospitals, Casa de los Niños. If you leave an unwanted newborn infant with any of these people within 72 hours of giving birth, I promise you no questions will be asked. You have to fill out no paperwork whatsoever. We don't even have to know your name, and you will not be prosecuted. So the same thing happened with the Amber Alert. Now, I can't take credit for creating the Amber Alert itself because that first happened in Texas. But we were the second place in the nation to make this happen. I was in my car. I heard about the Amber Alert, and it was on NPR, and they were talking about it, and I went, well, why don't we do that here? So we put together every radio station, every media broadcast outlet in Pima County and southern Arizona, and we came together and we said, look, and law enforcement, if we promise that we're only going to give you information on those kids that are truly abducted and not runaways and that kind of thing, will you do this? Will you stop and make a broadcast? And they said, absolutely. They agreed, and we did the Amber Alert. And then from there, I went to the legislature and convinced the legislature that we needed a state law to do this. I have a Kids in Court program. We have many, many, many children who are victims of some horrendous crimes that would make those of you with straight hair have very, very curly hair. And you would just be aghast. The things that you read in the paper don't even begin to illustrate some of the horrible things that are done to children. And the law says they have to testify. You cannot use videotape. You cannot introduce their testimony in any other way. If that case goes to trial, they have to get up on the stand. They have to look the person who physically or sexually molested them in the eye. They have to identify them. It's just horrendous. So I developed this program called Kids in Court to alleviate the anxiety and the stress that they feel, and it is a great program. We meet several times. My victim advocates play court games with them. We introduce them to court. We take them there. We get on the stand, let them cross-examine us, and they get to ask us any question they want, because we tell them under cross-examination, you can be asked any kinds of questions. So they ask us all kinds of questions. This was another thing. I was ridiculed, but not anymore. Everybody in my office loves our dogs. Russell is a beautiful 2-year-old golden retriever. He assists the children at the Children's Advocacy Center and other vulnerable victims of crime. He helps them cope with the stress and the trauma that accompanies victimization. Russell is paid for by the funds that we seized from criminals. Okay? You can't see it, but on his vest, he has a little vest that has our badge on it. And Russell's handler is the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center. She is Russell's main person. He was so popular at the Advocacy Center that when we had to bring him down to testify, be with someone who was testifying, they went, oh, we need Russell out here. So, hey, we had to get Blake. So Blake is our second courthouse dog. He's a black lab. He works downtown, and his handler is one of my victim advocates. Drug treatment, I want to run through these. Again, this is my issue, this is my priority. When I first came to the county attorney's office, I was assigned to prosecute in the narcotics team. So for 3 years, I prosecuted people who were, at that time, it was mostly cocaine and heroin. There was no methamphetamine and and actually a lot of marijuana, but mostly cocaine and heroin. And what I saw were that most of these people that I was prosecuting who were arrested for selling to undercover officers who had small amounts, I'm not talking about the major narco traffickers, I'm talking about the majority of our narcotics cases, about 80% of them, were people who were addicted. And but for their addiction, they probably wouldn't have been committing any crimes. Many of these people had education, had jobs, but they got addicted to some substance, and then as a result, they got involved in crime. And for years, I wanted to do this. It's a drug treatment alternative to prison. It saves lives, it saves money, it reduces crime, and I couldn't do it because we didn't have any funds. They'd been doing it for 19 years in Brooklyn, and I'm friends with the former Brooklyn DA, and he was telling me about it, and I really wanted to replicate it. But we didn't have any funds, because what we have to do is we take people who are on their way to prison, and they're on their way to prison because they have prior convictions. People who don't have prior convictions who are addicted go to drug court. But these are people that were headed to prison. And we put them in a residential therapeutic community as an alternative to going to prison. Well, it's way cheaper than prison. It's less than half the cost of sending someone to prison. And if they get sober and clean and become productive citizens, the benefit is to our community. Because I can assure you that when we send the addicted felons to prison, they don't get treatment. They come out, and guess what? They go back into their communities. They don't have wraparound job skills. I mean, we provide them all that. We give them transitional housing, literacy services, education, job training, placement services, dental work, eyeglasses, etc. This is the only program of its kind in Arizona. I'm really proud of it. I'm going to speed through the next couple really fast. I changed the way in which we prosecute domestic violence and have a team of people that have been trained and have recruited a judge who has trained himself in the cycle of violence, and we treat everybody in domestic violence court with a domestic violence vertical prosecution team. I have a special victims unit that is very well trained to deal with child sexual and physical abuse. So, my question was, what happens when women step up to roles of leadership? And I said the issues that women are most concerned about become our priority issues, and it's important for us to be in leadership because we make a difference.